Gentlemen yields, I now recognize myself for a closing statement. I want to thank you all for attending today. Very important hearing, and I especially thank our witnesses, Chief Heike, Supervisor Desmond, Ms. Morin, Sheriff Hathaway. Your testimonies, they've certainly stuck with me, and I know will continue to deeply affect the American people. Ms. Morin, my heart is with you and your family. I want to thank you for your courage today to tell Rachel's story. What happened is unimaginable. You're right, it was completely preventable. There are tons of stories like yours, thousands of American families. We have to put a stop to this. And to hear today from you that the person who did this to your daughter walked across our southern border, a policy that had been in place to do DNA testing, would have identified him as a murderer fleeing his own country, a policy that was done away with by this administration, led to the death of your daughter. And it'll be real hard to convince me otherwise. Mr. Heike, thank you for your valuable testimony. I want to thank you for your years of service to the country. You've kept our nation safe through 5 administrations. You've got firsthand experience. And what you said today in your 5 minutes, to me, is devastating to the policy decisions that this administration has made. You were very clear that they decreased returning people to other countries. They decreased detention, and it was purposeful policy changes, intentional. It led to massive increases in migration to our country. Then you were told to hide it so the media couldn't see it. You shared stories of human trafficking, sex trafficking of little girls. Secondary to this wave, because you're overwhelmed with resources, which was secondary to the policy changes. You told us today of the incredible, tragic increases in suicides amongst Border Patrol, and your exact words in your testimony correlated directly to the increase in migration caused by those failed policies and the removal of policies. You know, Mr. Correa, I love this gentleman. He's a great man. He talked about resources is the problem. And many people here have talked about, we got to have one of many, but okay. But if you implement policies and refuse to let people do their job, more people aren't going to solve the problem. And oh, by the way, H.R. 2, the bill we passed, increased the number of Border Patrol agents, but Mr. Desmond, we appreciate you being here with us today as well. San Diego County has seen some of the worst of this border crisis, and it does start at the top. It starts with President Biden and Vice President Harris, and I want to thank you for shedding some light on the situation in California and the realities of this crisis. And I really appreciated you talking about the fact that your state has ordered federal people and other people not to ask certain legal questions that are in the laws passed by this body. Ignore the laws. That's like saying, you know that Constitution that says this body writes the law, this body executes the law, this body adjudicates the law? We don't care about that. We're just going to pick and choose which laws we enforce. You don't like a law, you change it. That's a threat to democracy as far as I'm concerned. Sheriff Hathaway, I want to thank you for coming and for your service to your community. I totally disagree with you that the border wall is racist. I think that's absurd, and I really appreciate the question Mr. Crane had. Is a wall going to pick and choose which person it blocks? And I'll tell you, the last time I was at the border, it was a huge group of Russians coming in, and they're more white than I am. Stupid, actually. It's absolutely stupid to suggest that walls and the attempt to enforce our laws is somehow racist. But I do appreciate you coming. The truth is there are 2 competing visions for our country. That's it. On the one hand, some of us are fighting like hell to enforce the laws of our country, to go back to that Constitution that says this group writes the laws, this group enforces the laws. And we're prioritizing the well-being and the safety of American citizens. Yet, on the other hand, we have an administration led by President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris that couldn't care less about those laws, as evidenced by their actions. Pure and simple. It is inescapably clear that the Biden administration and Harris, along with him, ended effective border policies with no alternatives in place to secure our border. They implemented an unlawful policy of mass catch and release, and they gutted interior enforcement, casting aside their responsibility to enforce the laws that they swore to uphold. And they have continued to deceive the American people about it. Let's hide these people. Let's fly them to Texas. The truth is, Americans no longer feel safe in their communities. A little baby crawling on a floor in a VRBO in Florida is dead because of the fentanyl brought across our porous, open southern border that a witness today said has been left wide open so that we can process more people into the country. Millions of Americans have lost loved ones to fentanyl. And Americans who can't afford housing, whose insurance premiums have shot up, forced to watch as lawbreakers, have been rewarded with free housing and benefits. And I think it was you, Sheriff Hathaway, earlier, talked about not impacting inflation. I'm sorry. If 12 million people walk into the country, we can't just suddenly make a dairy for milk. And there's this thing called the supply-demand curve, basic economics. If you increase the demand without a change in supply, the price is going to go up. It's just basic economics. I thought spending almost 2 years investigating this border crisis would have more of an impact on the other side of the aisle. I thought laying out the human cost of this crisis, bringing in people like Ms. Morin, especially the cost of innocent women, children being trafficked, would have an impact. I thought telling the stories of those who've been victimized by criminal illegal aliens would weigh on their conscience. I thought bringing recognition to the memorandum written by the Secretary telling his people to ignore the laws passed by Congress and let felons into the country instead of detaining them would make a difference. I thought laying out the financial cost of this crisis to the American communities would make them think twice. I thought explaining how the crisis is overwhelming law enforcement officers would garner a little sympathy. I thought laying out in painstaking detail how this crisis is compromising our national security. 8 ISIS guys caught in New York. Jordanians trying to storm a military installation. And the ISIS guys used the CBP-1 app. I thought it would be a wake-up call to the administration. I was wrong. Instead, we've been ignored and we've been maligned. This administration is just as unwilling to end this border crisis as it was when we began these investigations. And that crappy bill put together in the Senate to give them justification that didn't pass the Senate, by the way. So we talk about how, we should have. It didn't even pass the Senate. Of course, they bring up the cat story. I don't care about that. I care about Laken Riley, who is dead. I care about your daughter, who is dead. Let's talk about that. Instead, they're talking about all this other stuff that just doesn't matter. It's clear to me, to this committee, to Congress, and the American people that Biden-Harris administration is hell-bent on keeping our borders wide open. This deception with the CBP-1 app it's not decreasing the flow, it's characterizing them in another way. And all we're being told is that the crisis is somehow over because of a couple of months of low crossing numbers, a shell game, as if that fixes the damage of the past 3.5 years, and ignores the objective reality that the numbers are still at crisis levels. millions continue to enter our country through illegitimate means like these mass parole programs. From day one, this administration has refused to enforce the laws of our nation, and eliminated effective border policies. And as a result, we have members of the most dangerous criminal cartels streaming into our country, linking up with gangs, creating a crime nexus, bringing drugs and crime with them. It's unsustainable. And to say, well, we need a guest worker, so open borders are okay, is absurd. It's also absurd, or at the very least contradictory, the claim that most of these immigrants are coming to work, when in reality, most are attempting to claim asylum. So which one is it? If they come and say, hey, I'm here to work, well, cool. We have this legal pathway. No, they're saying, I'm claiming asylum. So which is it? Are they coming out of credible fear for their life and safety? Or are they coming as economic migrants? You can't have it both ways. I honestly don't know how anyone can listen to the stories we've heard today and still stand by Biden-Harris administration's reckless policies. Policies that are killing Americans and compromising our national security. Exactly 1 week ago, members of this committee went to Ground Zero, the World Trade Center, to remember Americans killed on 9/11 and to honor the first responders who gave their lives, 19 men. That's all it took to take the lives of nearly 3,000 Americans. And yet our Border Patrol has stopped 384 suspected terrorists trying to get in. How many more of them are in the 2 million gotaways, known gotaways? Not even the ones that walked across while Chief of the Border Sector said, there was nobody there watching. Lastly, let me just point out how intentional this plan is. Its expansion of the CBP-1 app funneled hundreds of thousands of inadmissible aliens to ports of entry and then into the interior of this country. This is a major end around to our lawful immigration system. And as NBC News recently reported, even individuals with terrorist connections have been allowed in through this program. Well, we know who those are, some of them anyway. Additionally, massive fraud was discovered in the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan mass parole program, which allowed 30,000 inadmissible aliens into the country each month. Yet it's back up and running, even after reports from the folks at DHS claim they knew it's against the law. And after reports that the CHNV parolees have committed grave sexual crimes since arriving here. Simultaneously, this administration allows border wall materials to rust in the desert instead of choosing to build the wall we've already paid for. In short, the Biden-Harris administration is doing everything in its power to perpetuate this border crisis, and any claims to the contrary is misleading at its least. The truth is that even if President Biden shuts the border down tomorrow, it will not undo the damage this administration has caused over the last 3.5 years. Rachel Morin's death can't be undone. Laken Riley can't be brought back. And the heartbreak felt by those who have lost a loved one because of this border crisis cannot be fixed. How many times have we sat here and held hearings over the lawlessness of this administration and its refusal to obey the laws and secure our borders? We've passed legislation only to be ignored by Democrats. We've held cabinet officials accountable, again, ignored by Democrats. It was brought up today by one of my colleagues about this impeachment. I'm sorry. If you have a cabinet secretary who just gets to do whatever they want and not follow the laws of Congress, why do we have a Congress in the first place? But I guess Congress don't feel offended, right? Because the president was told by the Supreme Court he can't pay off student loans. He said, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway. I guess we don't need a Supreme Court either. We should just have a king. It doesn't have to be like this. It cannot continue to be like this. And I'm going to fight as long as I have the strength to ensure that we return to some form of law and order and sanity on this issue. There has to be change. Something has got to give. We need to secure our border and we need to do it now. I thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and the members for their questions on both sides. The members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses. We'd like to ask the witnesses to respond to those in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D, the hearing record will be held open for 10 days for those. Without objection, this committee stands adjourned.